At the bank, my daughter shoved a pen at me. "Sign it, old woman, it's just a formality." Her husband gripped my hand so hard his nails dug into my skin. I slipped the teller a note. "Help me. They're forcing me to sign." The manager's eyes widened, and without a word he pressed the panic button. Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now let's get started. Mother's Day in the suburbs of Chicago. It should have been a celebration. A day when the years I poured into motherhood were acknowledged, even quietly. Instead, it became the stage for my undoing. My daughter, Hannah, had decided to host a brunch in her sprawling new home. Nearly 100 guests filled every corner. The backyard with its neat patio, the living room with glass doors thrown wide open, the dining room where the buffet table sagged under trays of food. There was chatter, tinkling laughter, the clinking of champagne flutes. Hannah was radiant, moving gracefully between clusters of people, her blonde hair catching the sunlight, her designer dress swaying around her legs like she was hosting a magazine shoot. Beside her, her husband Cole played the perfect suburban prince, refilling drinks, laughing loudly, patting backs, asking people about their golf games. They looked like the picture of success. The perfect hostess, the attentive husband. A postcard couple in a pristine neighborhood. And me? I was the invisible machinery that made it all look effortless. I, Jane, 58 years old, had been awake since before dawn. I chopped vegetables until my wrists ached, seasoned meats until my fingers were raw with salt, baked quiches and tarts that filled the kitchen with a buttery scent. I ran trays from the oven to the buffet table, wiped spills, polished glasses and stacked plates. The tasks blurred together. Heat, knives, clatter, steam. My blouse stuck to my back with sweat before the first guest even arrived. Not once did anyone say, "Sit down, Jane. Let us handle this." Not once did Hannah ask, "Mom, do you need a rest?" I moved through the house like a servant whose presence was acknowledged only by the crumbs she cleared, the wine stains she dabbed before they could set. By late morning, the party was in full swing. The patio buzzed with conversation. Women in pastel dresses showing off manicures, men in press shirts talking about property values. I could hear Hannah's laugh, bright, rehearsed, rising above the hum. I caught glimpses of her raising her glass, leaning in to whisper something to a guest, touching Cole's arm in that way she knew looked affectionate from across a room. I tried to feel proud. This was my daughter, after all. The little girl whose hair I used to braid before school, whose piano recitals I never missed, whose tears I wiped after her first heartbreak. She was everything I once poured myself into. But the pride was poisoned with something else. An emptiness. At noon, after hours of labor, I finally gave myself permission to stop moving. I fixed a plate. A slice of the quiche I had made, a spoonful of roasted vegetables, a bit of chicken glazed golden from the oven. My hands shook slightly as I carried it to the corner of the patio, hoping to eat unnoticed. My body felt heavy, my feet sore, my throat parched. I sat at the edge of the long table, away from the clusters of guests. The sun warmed my skin. For a moment I thought, this is enough. Just let me eat quietly. Let me exist. But Hannah's voice cut across the patio like a whip. "Mom," she said loudly, her tone dripping with false humor, the kind of tone that makes cruelty sound like entertainment. "Don't embarrass yourself. Go clean up." Conversations faltered. Heads turned slightly. I felt heat rise in my chest. Not from the sun but from the sting of being exposed. And then she did it. She reached out, brushed her hand against my arm. Not a gesture of affection, but a careless push. The plate slipped from my grasp. It fell to the stone patio and shattered, food scattering in grotesque little heaps. Chicken skin glistening, quiche crumbling, roasted peppers rolling like marbles. Silence. A silence worse than laughter. Guests turned their eyes away, pretending not to see. Cole sipped his drink, as if his role was to let the spectacle pass. No one bent down to help. Not one person said, "Are you all right?" I could hear forks clinking again within seconds, the party resuming as if I were just a hired maid who had dropped a tray. Hannah's face tightened into a smile as she turned back to her guests. She lifted her glass, her back now firmly to me. I crouched down on the cold stone. My knees cracked as I picked up the porcelain shards with my bare hands. One piece sliced the base of my thumb, and a bead of blood welled bright and hot. I pressed my palm against my skirt to stop the bleeding, but the Rayal wound was deeper, invisible. I felt like a ghost at my own daughter's table. The humiliation wasn't new. Hannah's disdain had been simmering for years. But never before had she done it in front of so many witnesses. Never had she turned my sacrifice into a performance. As I dropped the shards into the trash, my body trembled, but my face stayed still. Inside, something ancient and heavy shifted. A thought pressed against my ribs, cold and sharp. No more. I wasn't going to be humiliated in my daughter's house again. I wasn't going to scrape plates and beg for scraps of kindness. I washed my hands at the kitchen sink, the water stinging the small cut. The faucet's hiss drowned out the laughter spilling in from the patio. For a moment I stared at the window above the sink. My reflection looked back at me. Lines etched around my eyes, gray strands threaded through my hair. A woman who had given and given, until giving was her entire identity. But in that reflection, I didn't see the servant they wanted me to be. I saw a woman who had finally snapped. I walked back to the patio, my hands raw from soap, my chest steady. I slipped into the background again, but this time not as a victim. I was observing, recording. I looked at Hannah laughing with her friends, Cole leaning close to whisper in her ear. They thought they had written me into the role of the silent helper. But I was rewriting the script. No one noticed my quiet resolve. And that was fine. Let them think I was defeated, humiliated, cowed into silence. Let them think I was nothing more than the woman on her knees picking up broken porcelain. They had no idea that, in that silence, I had made a vow. A vow that this would be the last time. The last time I let my daughter's cruelty define me. The last time I allowed myself to be humiliated under my own name. The last time I sat on the sidelines while others feasted on the life I had built. Mother's Day in the suburbs of Chicago didn't just break a plate. It broke something inside me that would never mend the same way again. And that fracture, that clean, sharp break, was the beginning of my freedom. The morning after the brunch, I woke with the dull ache of humiliation still lodged in my chest. It wasn't just the memory of the plate shattering, or the sting of Hannah's words echoing in my ears. It was the silence. The silence of those guests, people I had known for years, neighbors who had eaten at my table, who had accepted my holiday cookies, who had leaned on me when their children needed babysitting. Not one of them had lifted a finger. I tried to push the memory down as I dressed. I told myself, Jane, today is a new day. But my body felt like it carried the weight of 50 years of servitude. By noon, I remembered something that made my stomach drop. I had left my wallet at Hannah's. I'd tucked it into the side table near the entryway, while running trays in and out. My driver's license, my cards, everything sat there in the belly of the very house that had just devoured me. I debated. Should I call first? Should I wait a day? But the thought of that wallet being out of reach made me anxious. It wasn't about the cash. There wasn't much. It was about control. My name. My identity. I needed it back. So I drove. The streets of the subdivision looked too perfect, too smug, with their freshly mowed lawns and polished SUVs. Hannah's house gleamed like the crown jewel among them. I parked at the curb, hand trembling slightly on the gear shift. I walked up the path, rehearsing in my head how I'd smile politely, retrieve my wallet, and leave without giving them the satisfaction of seeing my bruised pride. But then at the door I froze. The voices inside were clear. Hannah's laughter, softer now, not the bright stage act she used at the brunch. And Cole's deeper tone, sharp with impatience. I reached for my keys out of habit, but the sound of Cole's words stopped me cold. Who cares? Soon her condo will be ours. Let her rot on the street. The words landed like a blow to the chest. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. My hand hovered above the doorknob, my breath caught. My condo. My only home. The place I had built after the divorce, after years of scraping by, after endless shifts and second jobs. The walls that held my life, my books, my photographs, my memories of raising Hannah. And now, it was nothing more than an inheritance they wanted to collect early. Cole, Hannah whispered, her voice low, though not low enough. Don't say it like that. It's true, he snapped. You know it. She's getting old. We've carried her long enough. Carried me? The words made bow rise in my throat. I carried them. Every babysitter bill, every down payment for their cars. The check slipped into Hannah's purse when Cole couldn't make rent. Carried them? I stood frozen, pressed against the siding of the house like a thief, though it was my dignity they were stealing. I didn't jingle my keys. I didn't knock. I didn't even breathe. Slowly, quietly, I stepped back down the path. Each footstep felt like a betrayal of my own motherhood. When I reached the car, I sat behind the wheel in silence. My chest heaved, but no tears came. Just clarity. They didn't love me. They loved my walls, my deed, my savings. They loved the shadow of my death, more than the presence of my life. I didn't go back for the wallet. Not that day. That evening, I reshaped everything. I sat at my small kitchen table, the one I had bought secondhand decades ago, scarred from years of meals and bills and lonely dinners. I laid out papers, receipts, notes. I opened my worn envelope of savings. $18,500. That was what I had tucked away, carefully, diligently, meant as a future gift for Hannah's new house. For years, I had told myself it was love, a mother's duty, to help her child step further than she herself had. That money was supposed to be a ribbon-wrapped gesture, a silent thank you for the chance to still be part of Hannah's life. Now it was no gift. It was a shield. That money would not buy them another dinner set or a bigger mortgage. It would protect me. I took out a notebook and began to write. Dates. Conversations. Words I remembered verbatim. The brunch. The plate. The remark at the door. Every humiliation. Every financial favor that had never been repaid. I wasn't writing as a mother anymore. I was documenting as a witness. The pen moved steadily, almost mechanically, as if my hand knew what my heart had been too slow to accept. I wrote down Hannah's exact tone at the brunch, sharp, dismissive, calculated for an audience. I wrote down Cole's words at the door. Soon her condo will be ours. Each sentence was another brick in the wall I was building around myself. And with each word, I felt less like the woman on her knees picking up shards, and more like someone preparing for war. I opened my phone and started researching, quietly, methodically. Elder financial exploitation. Power of attorney laws. Property title fraud. My heart pounded with every new phrase. It was a dark world I had never wanted to know existed, but it was the one I was already in. By the time midnight came, my plan was no longer survival. It was defense. I wasn't going to plead with Hannah. I wasn't going to ask Cole for decency. Those things had already been broken like the plate on the patio. No. What I was going to do was simple. I was going to protect what was mine. When I was younger, I thought betrayal would arrive like a storm, loud, sudden, impossible to miss. But the truth is quieter, more insidious. Betrayal seeps. It leaves traces on the surface, faint outlines of something darker lurking underneath. You don't always recognize it until you've lived with the stains long enough that they no longer wash away. After overhearing Cole's words, soon her condo will be ours, I began to notice everything differently. My house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a crime scene in progress. I decided that if they were planning, then I would plan harder. If they were whispering, then I would start listening. Not with my ears, those had been ignored for years, but with paper, with ink, with records that didn't vanish when people swore. It was just a misunderstanding. The first thing I did was take out a small spiral-bound notebook. A cheap thing from the dollar store, but in my hands it became something sacred. Every date, every overheard phrase, every odd detail went into it. I wrote in block letters, slow and deliberate, like a stenographer recording a trial no one else knew was happening. It didn't take long before entries piled up. May 15th. Hannah asked about power of attorney over dinner. She laughed as she said it, but her eyes weren't joking. It's just easier for paperwork, Mom, she insisted. I laughed back, pretending it was funny. Inside, I wrote it down. May 20th. Cole mentioned a loan in my name while he thought I wasn't listening. Through her it'll be faster, he said. Through me. Not with me. Not for me. Through me. I underlined that phrase twice in the notebook. May 23rd. Phone calls from the bank, but when I answered, the line clicked dead. Wrong numbers, or something else. I wrote them down anyway, time, date, caller ID numbers. The more I recorded, the clearer the pattern became. It wasn't just paranoia. It was preparation, on their part and now on mine. Neighbors, too, started noticing odd things. One afternoon, Pam, the widow who lived across the hall, knocked on my door, her face pink with the gossip she couldn't hold. "Jane," she whispered, leaning in as if the walls had ears. "I saw a man leaving your building yesterday. Not anyone I know. He looked professional. Suit, briefcase, shiny shoes. Realtor type. He got into Cole's car." Her words sat heavy in my stomach. I thanked her with forced calm, but my pulse thundered. Why was a realtor leaving my building with Cole? That night, I checked my county clerk's online portal, something I hadn't done in years. My heart stopped when I saw it. An inquiry on my condo title. Not a transfer, not yet. Just a digital fingerprint that someone had been sniffing around. I stared at the screen. My reflection ghosted over the glowing text. Inquiry, May 23rd. Requester. Private party. Private party. Cole. It had to be. My fingers trembled as I clicked through the documents. And then I saw it. What looked like the draft of a quitclaim deed. My name, my address, my unit number. And at the bottom, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. The J curved too wide. The A looped wrong. Whoever had drawn it thought a flourish could pass for familiarity. But I had signed enough checks in my life to know what my own hand looked like. This was a forgery, clumsy yet dangerous. I sat back in my chair, notebook open beside me. The weight of proof staring at me from two angles. My own ink and their fraud. They weren't just fantasizing. They were in motion. I saved the document to a flash drive. I printed a copy, slid it into a folder marked Keep Out. Then I did what I had never thought I would do in my own home. I installed cameras. Small ones, tucked discreetly above the entryway. Near the living room window, pointed toward my desk. Not because I loved surveillance, but because my reality now demanded evidence. I also started recording conversations. Not every one. Only the moments when Hannah's tone shifted from casual daughter to calculating heir. I'd keep my phone nearby, screen dark, voice recorder humming quietly. Cole's voice came out the clearest, his words carrying the arrogance of a man certain no one would dare catch him. One recording I caught by accident still makes my stomach tighten. "Hannah. She'll sign it if we frame it as paperwork for insurance. She never reads the details." Cole. "And if she doesn't?" Hannah. Pause. "Then we wait. She won't be around forever." The silence that followed was worse than any insult. A silence where their future bloomed on the grave of my existence. I played that recording back in the dark of my kitchen. Earbuds in. My hands cold against my coffee mug. I wrote every word in the notebook, pressing so hard the pen nearly tore through the page. I knew then that this wasn't just betrayal. It was theft in progress. Still, I kept my face calm whenever they called. I answered Hannah's casual, "Hi Mom," with the same tone I always had. I let Cole's fake warmth brush past me like smoke. If they thought I was oblivious, they would keep talking. And the more they talked, the more I recorded. I wasn't their mother anymore. Not in this game. I was their witness. Their archivist. And if they wanted to treat me as disposable, I would make sure the paper trail proved otherwise. One night, after copying another document, I whispered aloud into the empty apartment. "You thought I'd die quietly. You thought wrong." The walls absorbed the words. The camera blinked silently in the corner, recording nothing but the sound of my resolve hardening. The traces were there, on the surface, in the calls, in the papers, in the whispers. I had only to keep collecting them until the whole picture emerged. And when it did, Hannah and Cole would learn what it meant to underestimate the woman who had given them everything. By the time I uncovered the forged quitclaim deed, I knew I was standing at the edge of something much larger than family betrayal. This wasn't just about humiliation or disrespect anymore. This was about survival, legal, financial, even physical. I felt it in my bones. If I didn't act quickly, I would lose everything. But I was no lawyer. I had no idea where to even begin. The internet spat out jargon, revocable trusts, powers of attorney, fraudulent conveyance. Words that looked heavy with meaning but slippery in my grasp. I needed someone who could translate betrayal into paperwork, someone who could stand between me and the predators who happened to share my bloodline. That's how I ended up at a community college legal clinic on a Tuesday afternoon. A friend from church had whispered about it. They help people like us, Jane. People who can't afford the fancy firms but need real protection. The building was plain, with scuffed linoleum floors and a faint smell of copier ink. No grandeur, no mahogany desks, no suits. Just a row of chairs filled with people clutching folders the way drowning people clutch lifebuoys. I sat among them, my folder pressed to my chest, my palms damp. When they called my name, I entered a small office where a young man in his 30s introduced himself as Nate. His tie was crooked, his hair a little unkempt, but his eyes, sharp, focused, and kind, were exactly what I needed. "What brings you in today, Ms. Miller?" he asked, his voice calm, as though women didn't walk into his office every week with their worlds collapsing. I placed the folder on the desk, slid it toward him, and whispered, "My daughter and her husband are trying to steal my condo." The words sounded surreal, even to me, but once I started speaking, I couldn't stop. I told him about the brunch, about the plate, about the overheard conversation at the door. I told him about the forged deed, about Pam seeing the realtor, about the bank calls. I even played him the short audio clip I had recorded. Hannah's voice, Cole's arrogance. Nate listened without interrupting, his pen scratching notes in a yellow legal pad. When I finally stopped, my throat dry, he leaned back and exhaled slowly. "Mrs. Miller," he said carefully, "what you've described is not just family conflict. This is elder financial exploitation. It's illegal. And it's serious." The word elder stung me, but I swallowed the pride. Better to be labeled elder than victim. "So what do I do?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Nate outlined the steps with precision, as if he were building a wall brick by brick around me. "First, revoke any powers of attorney you've ever signed, even the ones you forgot about. Sometimes people slip a document in under the guise of helping with bills. Make sure you cancel them all." I nodded, writing it down in my notebook. "Second, transfer your condo into a revocable trust, what we call a family trust. You'll be the trustee. That means you control it. No one can touch the property without going through you. Another note, trust me as trustee. Third, file a complaint for elder financial exploitation. Even if the police don't act immediately, it creates a paper trail. That's important." I underlined paper trail 3 times. "Fourth, notify your bank. Put fraud flags on all your accounts. Tell them no one is authorized to sign, withdraw, or make changes except you in person." "Yes," I whispered, my pulse quickening. "And finally," he said, leaning forward, "spend a little money on prevention. A safe, home security cameras, a notary to record your signature samples. No more verbal agreements. From here on, every promise lives on stamped paper." It was overwhelming, but for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the brunch. Clarity. "How much will this cost?" I asked, bracing for the blow. Some legal clinics will draft trust paperwork for free, but it's better to pay a small fee to ensure it's airtight. A safe? 200, maybe 3. Cameras, a few hundred. Notary consultations, less than 50. Compared to what you're protecting. He paused. It's worth it. I thought of my envelope with $18,500. Once meant as a gift to Hannah, now my lifeline. The irony burned, but I nodded. "That money," I told Nate, "is not going to her anymore. It's going to this." For the first time, I saw him smile. Not a lawyer's polite smile, but a human one. "Good," he said. "That's exactly the shift you need." I walked out of that clinic with a checklist in my notebook and a fire in my chest. No more whispered prayers for kindness. No more hoping Hannah would wake up one morning and remember I was her mother. This was no longer about their love. It was about my survival. That afternoon, I bought a heavy steel safe and bolted it to my bedroom floor. I purchased 2 small cameras and positioned them carefully, one at the front door, one inside the living room facing the desk where I kept my papers. I arranged a meeting with a notary to record my signature, every curve and flourish, so no one could ever again forge my name without consequence. And then I sat at my kitchen table, filled out a revocation of power of attorney, and signed it with steady hands. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I thought of Hannah's voice at the brunch. "Mom, don't embarrass yourself, go clean up." And I realized, she had wanted me small, silent, servile. That was her power. But now I had a plan. And this time, I wouldn't be the one cleaning up. The days that followed felt like moving through enemy territory, every step careful, every breath deliberate. I didn't slam doors. I didn't announce changes. I didn't even let myself cry. Instead, I worked in silence, methodical, invisible, like someone dismantling a bomb wire by wire. I called it my quiet rearrangement. In just 48 hours, I unraveled the web Hannah and Cole thought they had spun around me. The first move was the trust. On Monday morning, I took the bus downtown, my folder heavy with documents, condo deed, tax records, ID. At the attorney's office, the air smelled of toner and stale coffee. I sat across from a paralegal who guided me through line after line of paperwork. My hand cramped as I signed, but each signature felt like a shield being forged. By noon, the condo was no longer in my name alone. It belonged to the Jane Miller Revocable Trust, with me as sole trustee. My home was mine again, but now locked behind a wall no daughter or son-in-law could breach. The second move, locks. That afternoon, I called a locksmith. He arrived with a toolbox and kind eyes that didn't pry. I stood by as he removed the old brass locks Hannah and Cole had keys to, and replaced them with heavy steel deadbolts. When he handed me the new set of keys, cold and solid in my palm, I felt a surge of power so sharp it nearly brought me to tears. The third move, utilities and mail. I canceled every joint access Hannah had once convinced me was simpler. No more family accounts. No more shared passwords. Electricity, gas, water, all redirected into the trust's name. At the post office, I filled out a form to redirect my mail to a P.O. box. The clerk didn't ask questions. She just stamped it and slid it back. Another barrier between me and their reach. The fourth move, the bank. I walked into my branch, the same one I'd used for 30 years, and asked to speak with the manager. She knew me by name, always greeting me warmly when I came in with Hannah at my side. This time, I was alone. "I want fraud alerts on all my accounts," I told her. My voice didn't shake. "From now on, no withdrawals, no changes, no transfers unless I'm here in person with ID." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Miller?" "No," I said. "But it will be." She nodded, typed into her computer, and within minutes, my accounts were armored. The fifth move, the notary. I walked into a small office on the second floor of an aging building. The notary, a woman with silver hair and sharp glasses, greeted me politely. She watched carefully as I signed several sheets, recording the unique angles and flourishes of my hand. When she handed me the stamped documents, she said quietly, "This will protect you." I left with a folder that now carried more weight than years of sacrifice ever had. And the final move, the police. It was late afternoon when I walked into the precinct, my notebook clutched in my hands. I explained what had happened. The overheard conversation, the forged deed, the neighbor's report of the realtor, the recordings. The officer's face hardened as I played the audio clip. Cole's voice saying, "Soon her condo will be ours." "This is serious," he said. He typed up a report, his fingers moving steadily. "You've done the right thing bringing this in early. If they attempt anything further, we'll have a trail." A trail. That word soothed me. For so long, my sacrifices had disappeared into silence. Now finally, the record existed. By the time I returned home, dusk was falling. I bolted the new lock behind me, placed the safe under my bed, and set the cameras to record. For the first time in years, I felt the apartment breathe with me instead of against me. I sat in my armchair and opened the notebook. On the fresh page I wrote, "Quiet rearrangement complete." Each word was underlined twice. I thought about Hannah's voice, so casual, so confident, when she once told me, "Mom, don't worry about paperwork, Cole and I will handle it." No, not anymore. There would be no more family agreements. No more trust handed out like candy. From now on, every promise had to bleed ink. Every arrangement had to bear a seal. Every word had to leave a trace. I looked around the apartment, my home, and felt a strange mix of grief and triumph. Grief, because I had to defend myself against my own daughter. Triumph, because I finally was. That night, as I turned off the lamp and the camera light blinked softly in the corner, I whispered into the dark. You thought I was weak. You thought wrong. And the silence of my apartment, no longer penetrated by their entitlement, answered back with peace. By Friday morning, the rearrangement was complete. My condo was fortified like a fortress. Not with bricks and guards, but with documents, locks, cameras, and signatures no one could copy. For the first time in months, I woke up and didn't feel like prey. But defense wasn't enough. I knew my daughter. I knew Cole. They weren't the kind of people to slink away when their schemes collapsed. They would circle back, smile sweetly, and try again with a different mask. I couldn't wait for their next move. I had to set the stage myself, lay the trap in plain sight, and let them walk right into it. The chance came sooner than I expected. My phone rang around noon. Hannah's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, my chest clenched, the old reflex, the mother's hope. I almost didn't answer. But I pressed accept, steadying my breath. Hi, Mom, she said, her voice syrupy sweet, the tone she reserved for when she wanted something. I've been thinking about the other night. The brunch. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have snapped at you. Let's do a family dinner, just us. No big party. Just us. Her apology was as hollow as a cardboard box, but I didn't let it show. That sounds nice, I said calmly. Why don't we do it at my place? Saturday evening. I'll cook. I could almost hear the smile stretching across her face. Perfect, Mom. Just like old times. She had no idea how right she was. The moment I hung up, I began to plan, not a dinner, but a confrontation. I called Pam, my neighbor, the one who had seen the realtor leaving with Cole. Pam, I said, my voice low. I need you on Saturday. Come by for dinner. But more importantly, I need you as a witness. Pam didn't hesitate. Say no more. I'll be there. Then I called Grace, my cousin, one of the few family members who still believed in loyalty without conditions. Grace, I need your eyes and ears on Saturday. Bring your patience and your sharp memory. She laughed softly. Sounds serious. I'll be there. By the time I hung up, I had my stage crew assembled. That evening, I prepared the props. On my kitchen table, I laid out 2 envelopes. One for Hannah. One for Cole. Hannah's envelope was thick, heavy with paper. Inside, I placed copies of everything. The trust deed, showing my condo was no longer in my name alone. The revocations of power of attorney, stamped and sealed. The bank fraud alerts and notices. The police report, including the transcript of Cole's words. The attempted quitclaim deed, with its forged signature highlighted in yellow. It was no gift, no blessing. It was a mirror, one that would force her to look at herself without the mask of daughterly devotion. Cole's envelope was slimmer, colder. It held a single flash drive. On it, recordings. His own voice, bragging about my condo, dismissing me as if I were already in the ground. Evidence he couldn't shout over. I slid both envelopes into my safe until Saturday came. The next day, I moved around my apartment with quiet determination. I cooked, not extravagantly but deliberately. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds. Food that smelled like comfort, but would serve as the backdrop to confrontation. I even baked a pie. The same one Hannah used to beg me for as a child. It wasn't for her, it was for me, to prove I could still cook with love, even when love had been stripped of reciprocity. At 6, the doorbell rang. Pam arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine. She gave me a firm hug and whispered, "I'm ready." Grace arrived minutes later, with her sharp eyes and sharper tongue. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked quietly. "I'm past wanting," I said. "This is survival." We set the table together, the candles lit, the plates gleaming. From the outside, it looked like any other family dinner. But beneath it all lay tension so thick it made the air hum. At 7 sharp, Hannah and Cole arrived. Hannah wore a pale dress, her hair curled, her smile wide. Cole carried a bouquet of flowers he must have picked up at the gas station. They looked like actors stepping onto a stage they thought they owned. "Mom," Hannah said brightly, kissing my cheek. This is so nice. Just us. Yes, I replied, my tone steady. Just us. We sat. We ate. Small talk flowed. Hannah asking about my walks, Cole making jokes about the weather. Pam and Grace joined in politely, playing their roles. To anyone else, it would have looked like reconciliation, like warmth returning to a fractured family. But I could feel the weight of the envelopes in the safe behind me. I could feel the cameras quietly recording. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, waiting for the moment. It came after dessert. Hannah lifted her glass, her smile radiant. To new beginnings, she said, her eyes locking onto mine. To family. To a new chapter. I stood, removed my apron, and walked to the safe. When I returned, I carried 2 envelopes. I set one in front of Hannah, one in front of Cole. For you, I said. They looked at me with curiosity, then confusion. Hannah opened hers first. I watched her face drain as she flipped through the papers. Trust deed, revocations, bank notices, police report, forged quitclaim. Each page another blow. What is this? She whispered. It means my home is in a trust, I said calmly. All powers revoked. Any loan in my name is a crime. And this, I pointed to the police report, is the record of what you've already attempted. Cole reached for the papers, his hand trembling with anger. I slid the flash drive across the table toward him. That one's for you, I said. It has your voice on it. The stage was set. The lights were hot. The audience was silent. And I was no longer the woman on her knees picking up broken porcelain. I was the one holding the script. For years, I had imagined a different kind of envelope moment. In the daydreams I once nursed, it was Hannah's housewarming. I would arrive with a bright smile, carrying an envelope that bulged with checks and bills. A surprise gift of $20, maybe $30,000, carefully saved over decades. I imagined her eyes softening, her voice trembling with gratitude. Oh, Mom, you didn't have to. I imagined her hugging me in front of everyone. Finally seeing me as more than the maid, more than the cook, more than the shadow trailing after her parties. That was the fantasy. The reality sat in front of me now, heavy and cold. The envelope I slid across the table contained no blessing. It contained chains cut, bridges burned, doors bolted. It was not a gift. It was a reckoning. Hannah's smile froze as she tore the flap open. Her hands moved with that eager quickness she had inherited from me. The same hands that once ripped open Christmas presents with squeals of joy. But there was no joy in this paper. Only truth. She flipped through the pages. Her cheeks lost color. The candlelight flickered against her skin, making her look ghostly. Mom, she whispered, her voice thin. What is this? I didn't hesitate. It's protection, I said. It means my home is no longer yours to covet. It lives in a trust now, and I am the sole trustee. It means every power of attorney you once waved in front of me has been revoked. It means the bank will treat any attempt to use my name as fraud. And it means the police already have your voices on record. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked to Cole as if for rescue. Cole reached across the table, snatched the papers from her hand, and skimmed through them. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed, darting over seals and stamps, the undeniable language of the law. What the hell is this? He snapped, his mask slipping. I didn't flinch. Instead, I slid the second envelope toward him, the smaller, thinner one. This is yours. He tore it open, expecting a check, maybe some token of surrender. Instead, a flash drive clinked onto the table. What's this? He demanded. Play it, I said calmly. His face flushed red. You think you can scare me with toys? Pam's hand, steady as stone, reached for her phone. She had prepared for this. With a few taps, she played the audio file aloud. Cole's voice filled the room, unmistakable, smug. Soon her condo will be ours. Let her rot on the street. The words hung in the air like smoke. Silence followed, thick, suffocating. Grace's eyes glittered with fury. Pam sat still, watching Hannah's face collapse. I leaned forward, my voice cutting through the silence. You thought I was blind. You thought I was weak. But every step you've taken has left a trail. Banks, notaries, police, they're all notified. Every attempt you've made to crawl into my life through fraud is now documented. The only thing you succeeded in doing was showing me exactly who you are. Hannah's eyes brimmed with tears, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were the tears of a gambler caught with empty cards. Mom, please, she whispered, her voice trembling. It's not what you think. We just wanted to help. To make things easier for you. Easier? My laugh was sharp, bitter. By forging my name? By planning loans in my name? By waiting for my death as if it were a windfall? She shook her head, her hands trembling, but she couldn't form an answer. Cole slammed his fist on the table. You can't prove anything. The room froze. His voice echoed off the walls, but his bravado cracked. Pam calmly held up her phone, the audio still on display. We already have. For a long moment, no one moved. The candles flickered. The pie sat untouched, its golden crust splitting in the cooling air. My daughter stared at me as if she no longer recognized the woman across from her. And in truth, she didn't. I wasn't the mother who picked up shards in silence anymore. I wasn't the wallet they could reach into. I was the woman who had drawn the line in ink and law. I stood slowly, my voice steady. I was planning to give you money, Hannah. A gift. A blessing. But you've made it clear. You don't want my love, only my property. So instead, I'm giving you this, boundaries. And if you cross them, it will not be me cleaning up the mess. It will be you in court, with your name dragged across every record. Hannah covered her mouth with her hands, her shoulders shaking. But I saw it, the glint of anger beneath the tears. She wasn't sorry. She was furious that her plan had failed. Cole shoved the papers back into the envelope, his jaw clenched. He didn't touch the flash drive. He didn't need to. The sound of his own voice already hung in the room like a noose. The dinner was over. The gift they expected had turned into a mirror, and neither of them liked the reflection. For years, I had told myself that my daughter was just stressed, that Cole was just immature, that their sharp words and selfish requests were byproducts of youth, not reflections of character. I told myself that beneath it all, Hannah was still the girl who once clutched my hand crossing the street, the child who used to slip notes under my bedroom door that said, "I love you, Mom." But that night, as we sat around the table, their masks slipped away. Cole was the first to break. His face, flushed from anger, twisted into something almost feral. He jabbed a finger toward me, the veins in his neck standing out. You think you've won because of a few papers and recordings? You think anyone cares? You're old, Jane. You're confused. Who's going to believe you when I say you didn't know what you were signing? I didn't move. My voice, when it came, was calm. I don't need to convince anyone, Cole. I already have proof. Documents, witnesses, audio. You left your fingerprints all over this. Pam leaned forward, her phone still resting on the table like a P*N. We all heard you just now. You can shout, but you can't erase your own words. Cole's mouth opened then closed. His eyes darted, calculating. He wasn't used to being cornered. Then Hannah's mask crumbled. She burst into tears, loud, heaving sobs that would have broken me once. She reached across the table, her hands trembling, her voice shaking. Mom, please stop. We never wanted to hurt you. We just wanted to secure our future. We thought you'd understand. Secure your future? I repeated, my voice sharp. By stealing mine? Her tears didn't soften me this time. I looked at her the way a surgeon looks at a tumor. Cold, clinical, seeing it for what it is rather than what it pretends to be. You weren't crying when you told Cole I'd sign anything if it was framed as insurance paperwork. You weren't crying when you planned loans in my name. You weren't crying when you joked I wouldn't be around forever. So why are you crying now? Her sobs faltered. She looked away. Grace, my cousin, broke the silence. Because she got caught. Cole slammed his chair back, standing abruptly. This is bullsh*T. You're framing us. You planted that recording. No one's going to take the word of a bitter old woman over us. Pam's lips curled into a cold smile. Funny, because the police already did. You should know, Jane filed a report last week. Officers are aware. And guess what? They're outside. Cole froze. Hannah's tears stopped as if someone had flipped a switch. Their heads whipped toward the door just as a knock echoed through the apartment. I had called ahead. Quietly, without drama. 2 officers waiting outside just in case this confrontation turned violent. When I opened the door, their uniforms gleamed under the hallway light. They stepped inside, professional but firm. "Evening, Mrs. Miller. Is everything okay here?" "Yes," I said, handing them a folder. "But you might want to explain these to my guests." The officer flipped through the documents. Trust deed, revoked powers of attorney, police report. He nodded slowly, then looked up at Hannah and Cole. "We're going to need you to calm down. Mrs. Miller has already flagged her property and filed a complaint. Any further attempts to interfere will result in charges. Do you understand?" Cole's bravado cracked. His voice, once booming, dropped to a mutter. "This is ridiculous." Hannah tried one last performance, her voice small, her eyes wide. "Officer, it's a misunderstanding. We're family. My mom's confused. We just want to help." The officer's tone turned sharp. "Family or not, you crossed this line again, and it's elder financial exploitation. That's a felony. I suggest you both leave before you make it worse." For a moment, no one moved. The candles flickered, the pie sat untouched, the air thick with shame. Finally, Hannah stood, her tears gone, her face hard. She grabbed her coat and hissed under her breath, "You'll regret this." Cole followed, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning with resentment. The officers escorted them out, their footsteps echoing down the hallway. The door shut, the lock clicked, and the silence that followed was heavy and holy. Pam exhaled slowly. Well, that was that. Grace shook her head. Not quite. That was just the beginning. They were right. The masks had fallen. There would be no more pretending, no more illusions of love. As I cleared the table, I thought back to every year I had spent giving Hannah everything. My money, my time, my strength, my silence. I thought of the plate shattered on the patio, the whispers at the door, the forged deed, the rehearsed tears. The masks were gone now, and in their place stood the truth, ugly and unvarnished. I wasn't her mother anymore. I was her obstacle, and I would rather be her obstacle than her victim. I had always believed change would take years, that reclaiming myself after decades of servitude would be slow, like the thaw of winter ice. But I was wrong. It took 7 days. 1 week. A week that stripped away illusions and left behind a woman I barely recognized. A woman who no longer asked permission to breathe. The morning after the confrontation, I woke to a silence so complete it felt sacred. No phone calls from Hannah, no forced cheer from Cole. Just quiet. I brewed coffee, buttered toast, and sat at my table with the sun spilling across the wood. For once, the food in front of me was mine alone. But peace didn't mean passivity. That day began the unraveling. By Monday, the bank had contacted me. Their compliance office had flagged a suspicious loan application in my name. Cole's attempt, already pre-approved, through one of his friends. The banker's voice was crisp. "Mrs. Miller, we have declined the application and notified the authorities. Your accounts remain secure." I thanked her calmly, but when I hung up, my hands shook with rage. They had been so certain, so smug. They had already begged *N celebrating my financial death. And now, their golden plan was ash. On Tuesday, the notary who had reviewed the forged quitclaim deed issued a formal rejection. The letter was stamped and official, words heavy with authority. Signature does not match known specimen. Document invalid. I read it 3 times, savoring the lines like poetry. A stranger had put in writing what I already knew in my bones. My daughter had tried to erase me. And failed. Wednesday brought news from the county clerk's office. My title had been flagged for fraud. Any further attempt to tamper with it would trigger immediate investigation. It was like watching someone bolt the doors of a vault I had once left wide open. By Thursday, Cole's world began to collapse. His employer called him in. Compliance issues, they said. My complaint had reached them through official channels. He worked in finance, in a position built on trust, and now the very word clung to him like poison. A man who had mocked me as confused, now stood accused in his own world. And Friday was the sweetest of all. Nate, the young lawyer from the clinic, called to update me. His voice was steady, almost triumphant. "Mrs. Miller, the temporary protection order has been granted. You are legally shielded. Any contact outside of official channels is prohibited. And the report of attempted elder financial exploitation has been filed with the state. I sat at my table, the phone pressed to my ear, the words sinking in like sunlight into frozen soil. Protection. Prohibited contact. Exploitation. Named, recognized, stamped into the record. For years, I had felt like a ghost in my own life, unseen, unheard, tolerated only for my labor. Now, in the span of 7 days, the world itself had confirmed my reality. The institutions I once feared would ignore me had become my armor. It was dizzying. I closed my eyes and thought back to the brunch, the plate shattering, the silence of the guests, Hannah's laughter floating above it all. That humiliation had been the match. And this week, the fire had spread. The quiet plan they had whispered about, waiting me out, forging my name, carving up my condo like vultures around a carcass, was no longer quiet. It was exposed, documented, collapsing under its own arrogance. And I was no longer on my knees. On Saturday morning, I pulled on a coat and walked through the neighborhood. The air was crisp, the leaves rustling underfoot. People nodded, waved. Some avoided my eyes, perhaps having heard whispers of the dinner gone wrong. Let them whisper. I was done hiding. As I walked, I thought about how quickly everything had shifted. 7 days ago, I was the woman cleaning up shards in silence. Today, I was the woman who had faced her betrayers with paper and law. I passed the coffee shop where Hannah used to beg me to meet her, always with some urgent expense to discuss. Rent overdue, car repairs, medical bills. I would nod, pull out my wallet, transfer money I couldn't spare. Every coffee had been bitter with shame. Not anymore. I kept walking until I reached the park. Children ran across the grass, their laughter cutting through the air like bells. I sat on a bench, breathing deep, and allowed myself a strange, guilty thought. Maybe I've been reborn. Not in the soft, sentimental way preachers talk about, but in the hard, brutal way life sometimes tears you open and forces you to rebuild. 1 week. That's all it had taken. 7 days to shift from victim to strategist. 7 days to turn their greed into their downfall. 7 days to watch the fragile empire of lies they built crack under its own weight. I knew it wasn't over. People like Hannah and Cole don't surrender gracefully. They would try again, in some new disguise. But the balance had shifted. They weren't the hunters anymore. I was. As the sun dipped lower, I whispered to myself, "You thought I was your prey, but I'm the one writing the story now." And for the first time in years, I believed it. I had thought the silence would last longer. That after the dinner, after the police at my door, after the rejection letters and fraud flags, Hannah and Cole would retreat, lick their wounds, and leave me be. But silence, it turned out, was only the inhale before their next attack. The backlash began quietly, in the way poison slips into water. It started with a text from Hannah. Long, sprawling, dripping with honeyed words. "Mom, it's all a big misunderstanding. We love you. We were only trying to help with your expenses. You've been under so much stress, and we just wanted to take some weight off your shoulders. Please don't let outsiders come between us. Family is family." I read it once, then again. The words shimmered with false warmth, but beneath them was a threat. "Drop your defenses, or we'll paint you as a paranoid old woman manipulated by strangers." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the message to Nate, my lawyer, and typed one line. "All communication through counsel from now on." His answer came back within minutes. "Good. Keep it that way." When I didn't respond, Hannah tried again. Voicemail this time. Her voice cracked with rehearsed emotion. "Mom, you raised me better than this. Please don't let paperwork and lawyers replace love. We can fix this." But love doesn't forge signatures. Love doesn't wait for your death like it's a prize. Still, the guilt she tried to weave pressed against me like a vice. I had to remind myself over and over that guilt was her P***N, not her remorse. Cole's backlash was louder. He showed up at my building 3 days later, pounding on the door. "Jane," he shouted, his voice echoing through the hall. "We need to talk. You can't just cut us out like this." The camera above the door blinked red, recording every second. I didn't answer. I stood in my living room, heart pounding, watching him on the monitor. He rattled the doorknob, slammed his palm against the wood. For a moment, I thought he'd break it down. But then he saw the lens. His eyes flicked up, met the camera, and he froze. A mask of rage slid over his face. He pointed a finger at the door. This isn't over. I sent the footage straight to the police. By evening, an officer called. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Donovan has been issued a formal warning. Any further attempt to approach your residence will be treated as violation of the protection order. I exhaled, my chest tight. Every step they took to int*mid-8 me was now another brick in the case against them. But int*midation wasn't their only strategy. They tried sympathy too. Pam, my neighbor, knocked on my door one evening, her eyes wide with disbelief. Jane, she whispered. You won't believe this. Hannah came by my door this afternoon. Said you were unwell. Said you'd been confused lately, mixing up dates, misplacing money. She wanted me to check in on you. I laughed, but it was sharp, bitter. So now I'm senile? Pam shook her head firmly. I told her I've never seen you sharper. That if anything, you're more alive now than you've been in years. She didn't like that answer. I thanked her. But inside, fury roared. Not content to steal my condo, they wanted to steal my reputation too. They wanted to plant doubt in the minds of my neighbors, to build a narrative that would soften the ground for legal action. Let them try. Every lie they spread would be met with paper, with evidence, with witnesses who had seen me stand taller, not smaller. In the meantime, I purged my home of their presence. I sold furniture Hannah had once claimed as hers. Pieces I had bought for her when she moved out but that had somehow migrated back into my condo when she didn't want to store them. I swept out old keys they had left behind, the ones I had once given them freely in the name of trust. I rearranged rooms, repainted walls, moved my life into shapes that no longer carried their fingerprints. Every change was a declaration. This space belongs to me again. Of the $18,500 I had once saved for Hannah's house, I had spent part on legal protections, safes, cameras. What remained I decided to put toward something different, something mine. I booked a short trip to Milwaukee, to visit my sister. A modest train ride, a few days away. But for me it was freedom incarnate. For years, I hadn't dared to leave for fear Hannah might need me, or worse, use my absence to slip into my home. Now with locks changed and cameras set, I could walk away without fear. The trip was simple. Coffee with my sister on her porch, long walks by Lake Michigan, afternoons where I didn't once check my phone for Hannah's demands. At night, I lay in the guest bed and listened to the quiet hum of a house untouched by betrayal. When I returned, the city looked different. Not because it had changed, but because I had. I stepped into my condo and smelled only my cooking, saw only my furniture, felt only my presence. No Hannah. No Cole. No shadows. Just me. The backlash would continue, I knew. People like them don't give up easily. They would try more manipulations, more lies, more attempts to claw their way back into my life. But the difference now was simple. Every move they made only deepened their own hole. And every day that passed, I climbed further out of mine. When I came back from Milwaukee, the city seemed sharper, clearer, as if someone had wiped a film from my eyes. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells, wondering what demand Hannah would make next, what scheme Cole would whisper about when he thought I wasn't listening. The air in my condo was still, clean mine. The silence was no longer heavy. It was healing. I spent the first week after my return simply reclaiming my routines. At dawn, I walked along the neighborhood streets, the air cool against my face, the rhythm of my feet steadying my breath. I hadn't walked like that in years, not with purpose, not for myself. Before, every step had been toward someone else's need. The bank for a transfer, the grocery store for Hannah's favorite items, the pharmacy for Cole's so-called emergencies. Now my feet carried only me. I signed up for watercolor classes at the community center. A silly thing, some might say, but for me it was liberation. I sat in a sunlit room with strangers, paintbrush in hand, letting color spill across paper. My hands trembled at first, unused to creating anything that wasn't food or paperwork. But then slowly, lines became flowers, shadows became lakes. And with every stroke, I felt years of servitude loosen. I baked pies again. Not for parties where Hannah would take credit for the spread, but for neighbors who knocked on my door with genuine smiles. Pam received one with tears in her eyes. "Jane," she said softly, "you're glowing. I haven't seen you like this in years." Glowing. Imagine that. At 58, after decades of giving everything away, someone looked at me and saw light. But peace never lasts unchallenged. 1 month after the dinner confrontation, Hannah appeared at my door. Alone. No Cole. She looked smaller somehow, her face pale, her eyes ringed with shadows. "Mom," she said, her voice quiet. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, but curiosity outweighed caution. I let her inside. She stood in the living room, shifting her weight like a child caught misbehaving. "I brought someone with me," she said. And for a moment my stomach clenched, until the door opened and a woman stepped in. Not Cole. A therapist. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I know I hurt you. I know I broke something between us. I'm here because I want to fix it. I've been talking to her," she gestured toward the therapist, "and I realize I've made terrible mistakes." For a heartbeat, the mother in me stirred, the one who wanted to believe, the one who still remembered braiding her hair, kissing scraped knees, reading bedtime stories under a quilt. But then I remembered the forged signature, the quitclaim deed, the words she had whispered to Cole. "She won't be around forever." I looked her in the eye and said calmly, "Trust isn't words, Hannah. It's years of actions. You've shown me who you are. If you want to change, fine. But we'll start with distance." Her tears flowed freely. She reached for me, but I stepped back. "I'm not doing this again," I said. "I won't play the fool twice." The therapist nodded quietly, as if she had expected this. They left soon after. Hannah didn't slam the door. She just looked back once, her eyes pleading, and then she was gone. I stood in my living room, my chest heavy but steady. I hadn't crumbled. I hadn't surrendered. For the first time in years, I felt like the ground under my feet was mine. In the weeks that followed, I continued building myself back piece by piece. I painted, I baked, I walked. I invited Grace over for tea, and we laughed until tears ran down our cheeks, the kind of laughter I hadn't known since before betrayal consumed my life. I opened closets and drawers, throwing out remnants of the past. Old bills I had paid for Hannah. Receipts for furniture that now sat in her house, unacknowledged. Keys they had once used to waltz into my home uninvited. All gone. Each item discarded was a piece of myself returned. I started sleeping through the night again. No jolts awake at 2 a.m., no racing heart imagining footsteps at the door. Just deep, steady rest. Sometimes I thought about Hannah, about whether her therapy sessions were real, whether her apologies were genuine. But I refused to anchor my healing to her choices. My life was no longer measured by her approval, her gratitude, her scraps of affection. My life was mine. One morning, as I walked through the park, a child ran past me, laughing, her mother chasing behind. For a moment, I saw Hannah as she once was, small, innocent, untouched by greed. My heart ached, but the ache was clean, no longer poisoned by resentment. You cannot unmake a mother, but you can unmake her chains. That's what I had done. People ask me sometimes why I share this story. Why put on display the ugliest wound a family can inflict? Why not quietly move on? Let time bury the shame, pretend the betrayal never happened. Because silence is what almost destroyed me. Silence is what let Hannah sneer at me during brunch while 100 eyes turned away. Silence is what allowed Cole to whisper about my condo, as if I were already buried beneath it. Silence is what chained me to decades of servitude, mistaking exploitation for love. So I speak now. Not for pity, not for revenge, but for protection, for myself, and for anyone who might recognize a piece of their own life in mine. Paper protects better than pleas. Signatures outlast tears. Stamps hold firmer than promises. This is what I learned. When I revoked those powers of attorney, when I shifted my condo into a trust, when I handed my daughter an envelope heavy with proof instead of money, I realized that betrayal feeds on invisibility. Once exposed, it withers. Hannah and Cole learned that the hard way. Their quiet plan was never meant for daylight. It was built on whispers, forged papers, rehearsed tears. It collapsed the moment I dragged it into the open, page by page, signature by signature. In 1 week, their fantasy of inheriting my life before I was gone turned into a nightmare of bank rejections, police reports, and legal flags. And me? I didn't just keep my condo. I kept my dignity. The cost was steep. I lost the illusion of a daughter's unconditional love. I lost the hope that family would someday mean safety again. But what I gained was harder, colder, and far more valuable: freedom. Now, when I walk into my home, I don't hear Hannah's voice telling me not to embarrass her. I don't hear Cole bragging about what will soon be ours. I hear only my own footsteps, steady and certain. I fill my days not with their demands, but with my choices. Watercolor classes, morning walks, pies cooling on my counter. I share them with people who actually see me. Neighbors who knock on my door with smiles instead of schemes. Friends who laugh with me instead of plotting behind my back. Even Hannah, in her halting way, has begged *N to surface again. She came once with a therapist, apologies tumbling from her lips like loose change. But apologies are not enough. Trust is not built by words. Trust is built by years. And years are what she took from me, squandered, spat on. So I told her the truth. We start with distance. I don't know what will become of us. Maybe one day she'll change, truly change. Or maybe she won't. That part is no longer my responsibility. My responsibility is me. And that is why I share this story with you. Because maybe you too have a Hannah. Maybe you have a Cole. Maybe you've been told to stop embarrassing yourself. To let family handle it. To trust us when every instinct screams otherwise. Maybe you've swallowed humiliation in silence, convincing yourself that love was worth the sacrifice. If that's you, hear me now, stop. Do not wait for their kindness. Protect yourself with paper. Guard your dignity with locks and stamps. Do not mistake their entitlement for your duty. You are not a burden. You are not an ATM with feelings. You are not a placeholder until they inherit your life. You are yours. I was 58 when I finally understood this. 58, after decades of giving, after decades of telling myself that motherhood meant self-erasure. I wish I had learned sooner. But it is never too late to stop being a victim in your own home. So I end this story with an invitation. If you've read this far, tell me where you are. Tell me what city holds you as you read my words. I want to know how far this story travels, how many kitchens, how many living rooms it enters. Because if betrayal thrives in silence, then survival thrives in connection. Together, our voices are louder than their whispers. There are more stories in me. Stories of sacrifice, of betrayal, of clawing my way back to myself. If you want to hear them, stay. Listen. Share. Not for me, but for you. For the next woman who thinks she's alone as her family sharpens their knives behind her back. I am Jane, 58 years old. I did not lose my condo. I did not lose my name. I did not lose my dignity. I lost the fantasy of a daughter's love. And in its place, I found something stronger, myself. With love, with respect, and with a voice I will never again surrender. Thank you. Now I ask you, what would you do if it were your daughter sitting across from you with a forged deed in her hands? Would you forgive? Would you fight? Or would you, like me, finally say no more? The silence after betrayal is unbearable. But the silence after freedom? That silence is holy.